بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والضبط ضبط صدر، وهو أن يثبت ما سمعه بحيث يتمكن من استحضاره متى شاء. وضبط كتاب، وهو صيانته لديه منذ سمع فيه وصححه إلى أن يؤدي منه. وقيد بالتام إشارة إلى الرتبة العليا في ذلك. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he now explains the second condition that he mentioned for a narration to be classified as sahih. So the first condition was binaqli adlin, that the narrator needs to be adl, and we explained about that in the previous lesson. So now he explains the second condition, and that is about ḍabṭ. So he says ḍabṭ. Ḍabṭ refers to accuracy, that a narrator must be accurate and precise in the way that he transmits what he heard. Now here it's used as an istilah, so therefore it will be best if we look first at the literal meaning of this word ḍabṭ, so that we can understand why the muhaddithin chose this particular word. So lughatan, the word ḍabṭ is used in various different meanings, but I will just suffice by mentioning two meanings, because those two meanings have a direct impact here. And I'll quote it from Lisanul Arab. So the first meaning which is mentioned in Lisanul Arab, وقال الليث الضبط لزوم الشيء لا يفارقه في كل شيء وضبط الشيء حفظه بالحزم. That when something holds rigidly onto another thing in such a way that it never separates, then you can use the word ضبط. So that's the one meaning. And the second meaning is والرجل ضابط حازم والرجل ضابط وضبطي قوي شديد. That when a person has lots of strength, he's extremely strong, then you can use the word ضابط for him. You describe him by saying that he is ضابط. So it refers to strength and being strong. Once you understand these literal meanings, now you can easily understand the technical meaning, that the narrator must be able to preserve the narration with strength until the time he conveys it. There are two types of ضبط. So the first is ضبط الصدر, and this here is preservation and retention through memory. And the second is ضبط الكتاب, and this here is preservation and retention through writing. So this here is proven from earlier scholars. Just to quote it from one of the earlier scholars, Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, he said, and we'll quote it from Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, volume 5, page 260. He said, Huma thabtan, thabtu hifz wa thabtu kitab. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he explains the first type, and he says ضبط sadr. So the literal meaning is the accuracy of the chest, what it means to memorize a narration. وهو أن يثبت ما سمعه بحيث يتمكن من استحضاره متى شاء. That the person, he retains the narration in such a way that he is able to recall it whenever he desires. So this means that a person has to have continuous memory of the narration. And this here is established and proven from the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, Imam Ahmad rahmallah, Imam Abu Dawud, Imam Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah rahmallah, they narrated what the asanid to Zayd ibn Thabit radiyallahu anhu, that he said, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول نظر الله امرأ سمع منا حديثا فحفظه حتى يبلغه. Can you see that the person must memorize it حتى يبلغه, until the time that he conveys it. So although we're quoting this here from Zayd ibn Thabit, this narration is actually transmitted via more than 20 different Sahaba. Although this wording differs slightly, but they all have this important point, that the Prophet ﷺ is making dua for that person who memorizes the narration until the time he conveys the narration. Now there are a few conditions for ضبط الصدر. So first let me quote an Arabic text from Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah, and then we'll go through the conditions. So he mentions وأما الضبط فإن تفسيره سماع الكلام كما يحق سماعه. So this is the first condition. ثم فهمه بمعناه الذي أريد به. That's the second condition. ثم حفظه ببذل المجهود له. That's the third condition. ثم الثبات عليه بمحافظة حدوده ومراقبته بمذاكرته على إساءة الظن بنفسه إلى حين أدائه. So this is what Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah mentioned in his usul on page 165. So the first is that a person needs to listen attentively. That there's a whole chapter which comes in Muqaddamah ibn Salah. If a person is unattentive at the time of tahammul, then would you accept that narration or not? So it's essential that the narrator has to listen attentively, because if he does not listen attentively, then the first point of getting the narration within his mind, that is lost. He's going to get an incorrect narration, isn't it? So that's the first condition. The second is ثم فهمه بمعناه الذي أريد به. That it refers to understanding the narration. If a person does not understand something and then he tries to quote it, he might just end up making a blunder unintentionally. He won't even know that he's making a mistake because he does not understand. So Allama ibn al-Athir rahimahullah, he mentioned in his Jami' al-Usul, and if you remember we spoke about this here when we were doing the introduction of this kitab. So on page 72 he mentions الضبط وهو عبارة عن احتياط في باب العلم. That ضبط is all about taking precaution. له طرفان. طرف وقوع العلم عند السماع. That one is you need to get knowledge the minute you hear it. So that means you need to be a sensible person. You must be able to understand what you just heard. وطرف الحفظ بعد العلم عند التكلم. And then after that you come to memorizing it. حتى إذا سمع ولم يعلم لم يكن شيئا معتبرا. If a person has to hear something but he does not attain any knowledge, he does not understand what he heard, لم يكن شيئا معتبرا, then this here is not going to be considered. كما لو سمع صياحا لا معنى له. If a person hears someone screaming, then this here is no meaning. وإذا لم يفهم اللفظ بمعناه على الحقيقة لم يكن ضابطا. Likewise, if a person does not understand even the literal meanings of those words, لم يكن ضبطا, then this here is not going to be considered as ضبط. Now here an important point to clarify is that when we speak about understanding the narration, then it refers to basic understanding of the text. That if you just understand the literal meaning, you know that when you hear something and you can understand what is being told to you, even if you do not understand all the fiqh behind that narration. So Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah, he says وَهُوَ نَوْعَانِ ضبط المتن بصيغته ومعناه لغة. So you just understand the linguistic meaning of the text. Like for example, if it's mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ would raise his hands before going into ruku', now you understand what's the meaning of raising the hands. So this here is the literal meaning. والثاني أن يضم إلى هذه الجملة ضبط معناه فقها وشريعة وهذا أكملها. The second is where you combine what is the proper understanding according to Sharia. So that is the fiqh of this narration. This here is akmal. But والمطلق من الضبط يتناول الكامل. The former is kamil and the latter is akmal. When we just mention the word ضبط, then it refers to kamil, that a person at least he is able to understand the literal meaning. So to show you the amount that a person should be able to understand, he says وَلِهَذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ خبر من اشتدت غفلته خلقة أو مسامحة أو مجازفة حجة لعدم القسم الأول من الضبط. That if a person is insane, whether he was born with mental disabilities or he lost his mind for a few moments, if this person here, he will not be able to make a ضبط of the narration. So now you can understand what's the meaning of ضبط. That a sane person, if he hears the statement, he will be able to understand it, he will be able to digest it, he will be able to make sense of that narration. That's the amount of understanding that is needed. Yes, when you read Taqweem al-Adillah of Allama Dabusi rahimahullah, then you could understand that faqaha is a condition. However, the preferred view within the Hanafi madhab is that faqaha is not a condition. So that's the second condition. And then the third condition which Allama Bazdawi rahimahullah mentioned is ثم حفظه ببذل المجهود له, that the person is able to memorize it. Now here he mentions ببذل المجهود له, so it does not matter, it's not conditional that a person have to have a photographic memory. The minute he hears the narration, he already retains it. You know, there are so many incidents like this here from the muhaddithin of the past, great imams. They would hear numerous ahadith being rattled off, and they would be able to retain and memorize all of them instantly. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with those kind of memories, that it was like tape recorders. But he's saying بِبَذْلِ الْمَجْهُودِ لَهُ, even if a person needs to repeat the narration, if he has to exert some effort in order to memorize it, then that too is fine. It's not conditional that a person needs to have this kind of a photographic memory. So this is the third condition. And then the fourth condition, ثم الثبات عليه بمحافظة حدوده ومراقبة به, and it's that the narrator needs to possess the ability to recall that narration at any time. Now here Mullah Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, in the text he just says بحيث يتمكن من استحضاره متى شاء, in such a way that he possesses the ability in recalling it whenever he wants to. However, Alama Munawi rahimahullah, he explained, لكن لا يشترط أن يكون استحضاره دفعيا بل يكفي أن يستحضره شيئا فشيئا على التدريج. It's not necessary, it's not conditional that the person is able to blurt it out the minute he is asked. Rather, if he needs to recall it, if he needs to apply his mind, if he needs to think a little bit, if he's stuttering a little bit, if he's recalling word for word, then that is fine. He doesn't need to just mention it the minute he is told. So this also shows us the difference between this and the previous condition of Sahih. That for Adala we mentioned that a person needs to fulfill that condition only at the time of narrating. That a person at the time when he heard it, he can be a kafir. Even the morning when he is going to narrate it, he can be a kafir. But at the time when he is narrating it, if he's a Muslim, then it's fine. So we don't look at what was his condition before the time when he was when he narrates the narration. But here for Ḍabṭ, it's essential that we look continuously at the condition of this narrator from the time he heard it until the time he narrates it. All the intermediary period, that whole time in between, on all that period, we also focus on that at every given moment he was able to recall that narration. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he was actually very strict on this here. Alama ibn al-Awam rahimahullah, he quotes what is sent to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, that he said, لا ينبغي للرجل أن يحدث من الحديث إلا ما يحفظه من يوم سمعه إلى يوم يحدث به. He mentions this here in his book فضائل Abi Hanifa. It's on page 125. And by the way, this book here is probably the most authentic and the best book on the Fadail of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. It's written by Alama Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Yahya al-Ḥadīth, and he's famously known as Ibn Abil Awam. So the full name of the book, you can jot it down so that you can get it, especially if you're Hanafi. I'm sure you'll desire to get the best book that's written on the virtues of your Imam. So the name of the book is Fadail Abi Hanifa وأخباره ومناقبه, and it's printed by Maktaba al-Imdadiyya with the tahqiq of Sheikh Latif al-Rahman al-Qasimi. So nevertheless, in this book he says لا ينبغي للرجل أن يحدث من الحديث إلا ما يحفظه. It's not appropriate for a person to transmit any narration إلا ما يحفظه, except if he memorize it من يوم سمعه إلى يوم يحدث به, from the day he heard it until the day he transmits it. So this here is the first type of Ḍabṭ, that it's through memory, and a person has the memory throughout the time of from the time he heard it until the time he is officially quoting it. The second type of Ḍabṭ is ضبط kitab. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah writes here وضبط الكتاب وهو صيانته لديه منذ سمع فيه وصححه إلى أن يؤدي منه. The accuracy of the book, it's preserving and looking after that book from the time he heard it and he corrected whatever is in that book إلى أن يؤدي منه, until the time that he is going to convey it. So to write down and to make your own notes of narrations when you are hearing from the Shaykh, that is permissible, because every person, every narrator was not blessed with good memories. So therefore some of the narrators had to resort to writing. They had to use the siyah as a method for preserving and narrating a hadith with accuracy, because if those who had weak memories had not done the siyah, then they would not have preserved the narration and transmitted it to the coming generation. Many ahadith would have been lost, isn't it? So many ahadith would not have reached us. لو اعتبر في حق عدم جواز الرواية أدى إلى تعطيل الأخبار والأحاديث. كيف والنسيان مركب في الإنسان ولا يمكنه الاحتراز عنه إلا بحرج بين. So therefore it was essential that they had to allow this type of preserving of ahadith. Now here quickly let me just give a background on writing and documenting ahadith. And this year it's very basic. In 5th year and in final year you learn the history of Kitabatul Hadith in detail. So very quickly I just want to touch on it. You see, in the era of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that there were a few companions who obtained permission to write down a hadith. But the general ruling was that it is prohibited to document any narration. So in Sahih Muslim, there is that narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, where he said, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا تكتبوا عني شيئا إلا القرآن ومن كتب عني شيئا غير القرآن فليمحه. That no one should write anything from me besides the Quran. And if you wrote anything else from me, so whether it's my own words also, then you need to erase it. And there are numerous other narrations like this. You done all the narrations which prohibit writing, and you also done the counter narrations that permitted the transcribing of ahadith. So a whole 30 minutes will go if we have to discuss all of those narrations, even if I just have to quote all of them. But let me just quote one random narration to show that there was permission given for writing ahadith. So in Sahih al-Bukhari, Imam Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, he said, ليس أحد من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أكثر حديث مني إلا ما كان من عبد الله بن عمرو. Why? فإنه كان يكتب ولا أكتب. Abdullah ibn Amr would write and I would not write. And besides Abdullah ibn Amr, there were other Sahaba as well. For example, Ali radiyallahu an, Abu Shah, you you done the narration, all those ahadith. But despite the consent to these few companions, after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, majority of the Sahaba, they maintain the position that it is impermissible to write down any ahadith. Then fast forward a few years, during his Khilafah, Umar radiyallahu anh, first he held a discussion with the other companions regarding whether they should now officially write down a hadith and use this as a means of preserving the ahadith. Allama Abdul Razak rahimahullah, he quotes, so قال عبد الرزاق عن معمر عن الزهري عن عروة أن عمر بن الخطاب أراد أن يكتب السنن فاستشار أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في ذلك. He made مشورة with the companions فأشاروا عليه أن يكتبها. All of them said that yes, this here is a very good suggestion. We should document the ahadith. This here is a great method of preserving ahadith. But Umar radiallahu anhu, he did not stop there. He made istikhara, and he made istikhara for a very long time. And this here also would show you that you can make istikhara for longer than 7 days if you are still doubtful. So فَطَفِقَ يَسْتَخِيرُ اللَّهَ فِيهَا شَهْرًا. He continued making istikhara for 1 full month. ثم أصبح يوما. Then one day he came and he said that كنت أريد أن أكتب السنن وإني ذكرت قوما كانوا قبلكم كتبوا كتبا فأكبوا عليها وتركوا كتاب الله وإني والله لا ألبس كتاب الله بشيء أبدا. So here I mentioned that it's best that they do not write the ahadith, and he recalled about previous nations when they wrote the words of their prophets, then it was mixed up with their holy books, with the with the Torah, with the Injil, etc. And therefore he decided, he passed the decision that now we are not going to document, we're not going to write down any ahadith. Nonetheless, with the passage of time, then scholars began to accept that ahadith can be written. So then on an official level also and on a personal level, people began to write ahadith. So there were books which were written for the public, and narrators also began to jot down their own notes and narrate from a script. And the reason why now many of the narrators had to write down is because they were either unable to memorize or they were not willing to make the effort to memorize. So Ibrahim Nakh'i rahimahullah, he said, كانوا يأخذون العلم حفظا, that initially they would memorize the ahadith. ثم أبيح لهم الكتاب. So here when he uses the word kitab, then it's al-kitaba, it means the writing down. Why? لما حدث بهم من الكسل, because now they became lazy, they didn't want to now take the trouble of memorizing. وقد جاء في الحديث قيد العلم بالكتاب أي بالكتابة. However, there were some who said, okay, that it's fine if you want to do it on an official level, that you want to write for the public, because then everyone will get access to your book, so it will be hard for anyone to distort. However, on a personal level, they were still not very comfortable with that. So for example, Imam Malik rahimahullah, he wrote his Muwatta. This was for the public, but he did not like and he did not accept the recording of a hadith on a personal level. So Alama ibn Abi Hatim rahimahullah, he narrates with his sanad to أصب ibn Abdul Aziz that سئل مالك أيؤخذ ممن لا يحفظ ويأتي بكتب, that can we take narrations from that person who does not memorize and then he comes with all his books and is quoting from his books. فيقول قد سمعتها, and then he says that I heard all of these. وهو ثقة, and this person here is reliable, so can we take narrations from such a person? Imam Malik rahimahullah said لا يؤخذ عنه, that no, you cannot take narrations from him. أخاف يزاد في كتبه بالليل, that I fear that his books will be distorted at night when he is unaware. So this here is the one reason, and this here is quoted by Ibn Abi Hatim in Al-Jarh wa Ta'adil in volume 2 on page 27. So the one reason is that a wrong person could get hold of those notes and then he could distort them, or he could add something to them, and this person would then go around quoting and he would not even know that he is quoting with such notes that were changed. Other scholars, they felt that writing a hadith would also lower the standards of the narrators. Imam Awza'i rahimahullah, he mentioned that, and he would actually continuously say this here, كان هذا العلم كريما تتلقاه الرجال منهم فلما دخل في الكتب دخل فيه غير أهله. That you can see, once it entered into books, now those who were not competent enough, they would they would become now narrators of hadith, because now anyone can write. So therefore, if you put it as a condition that a person has to have this good memory, then you are setting the bar, you are setting the standard. Those who do not reach the status, they cannot narrate a hadith. Nevertheless, by the beginning of the 3rd century, writing ahadith became widely accepted. And despite having the best of memories, scholars began to write. So you have scholars like Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, Ali ibn al-Madini rahimahullah, they would make their notes, and we'll quote from them later inshallah. But what we understand from this here is that Allama Sakhawi rahimahullah, when he said وَإِن مَنَعَ بَعْضُهُمُ الرِّوَايَ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ, then he is referring to the very early scholars, that there were those who prohibited. Now here we quoting that Imam Malik rahimahullah did not like writing your own personal notes. So after quoting that statement of Imam Malik rahimahullah, a senior Maliki scholar, Alama Abul Walid Baji rahimahullah, he said, وَهَذَا الَّذِي قَالَهُ رحمه الله هو النهاية في الاجتهاد إلا أنه قد عدم من يحفظه ولو لم يؤخذ إلا عمن يحفظه لعدم من يؤخذ عنه فقد قل الحفاظ واحتيج إلى الأخذ عمن له كتاب صحيح وهو ثقة ينقل ما في كتابه. This year Imam Malik rahimahullah, he wrote it in those times when you had lots of narrators who had these brilliant memories. However, now people's memories are starting to dwindle and starting to weaken. So therefore we are forced to permit that it is permissible to jot down the narrations when your teacher is speaking, and thereafter you can quote those narrations. And as long as the person, he says وهو الثقة, the person himself needs to be reliable, and له كتاب صحيح, he needs to come with an accurate book, and thereafter he can then quote from there. فإن كان الآخذ مما يميز تبينت له الزيادة. If he is able to differentiate and he is a good narrator, he is thiqa. So thiqa does not mean that here maybe he might not be a hafiz, he might not have that best type of memory, but he has a good memory that if someone had to come and add something, then he would be able to make out. وإن كان لا يميز فالأمر فيه ضعف. But if it's a person who cannot differentiate, and he will not be able to notice that someone has added something here, then it will be considered as weak. So that's according to the Malikis. With regards to the Hanafis, Alama Khatib rahimahullah, he quotes what that Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, he mentioned that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah would not allow a person to narrate from a script without memorizing. So Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn Ma'in rahimahullah, he was asked about a person who finds amongst his notes some ahadith that he has written down. So Yahya ibn Ma'in, when he was asked about this here, then he said, كان أبو حنيفة يقول لا يحدث إلا بما يعرف ويحفظه. So Alama Khatib rahimahullah, he mentions this in Al-Kifaya volume 2, it's page 91 and page 92. However, Muhammad ibn Humayd is one of the narrators in the chain of transmission, and although Alama Abu Nu'aym rahimahullah regarded him as reliable, Alama Barqani rahimahullah said that he is weak. So Alama Dhahabi rahimahullah, he quoted in Mizan al-I'tidal fi Naqd al-Rijal volume 6 page 127, Muhammad ibn Humayd ibn Suhail al-Makhrami حدث عن أبي خليفة الجمحي وطبقته ضعفه البرقاني ووثقه أبو نعيم الأصبهاني. Alama Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he elaborates on the reason why Alama Barqani rahimahullah regarded him as weak. He said كان عنده أحاديث غرائب وكان قد كتب مع الحفاظ القدماء إلا أنه كان فيه تخليط في أشياء قبل أن يموت. So you can see that he had a gharaib. So having a gharaib is one of the reasons why he was weakened. And then he also would mix up things before he passed away. And Ibn Hajar rahimahullah said, ولا أحسب تعمد ذلك. I don't think he done this here intentionally. Rather, لأنه كان حميد الأمر إلا أن الإنسان قد تلحقه غفلة. Sometimes a person just becomes a bit negligent. Here, it's important to note that the Hanafis, they have a different concept regarding writing. So according to Hanafis, the script is merely an aid. So the script, whatever you write down, that serves as an aid. It serves as a reminder to assist the narrator in recalling the hadith. So if a narrator is unable to recall anything from memory after looking at the script, then that is when Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he prohibits narrating from the script. But in contrast to him, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad rahimahumullah, they permitted narrating from the script. So this here is mentioned in Kashful As-Sarar. Inshallah, we'll just add the Arabic quotations in the notes so that we don't have to quote everything here, because there's a few other points that I still want to quote. So ultimately, from Alama Bazdawi rahimahullah, most of the scholars who came thereafter, they permitted writing and narrating from a script. فالحفظ من غير واسطة الخط وهذا فضل خص به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لقوة نور القلب عن الخط وكانوا لا يكتبون من قبل ثم صارت الكتابة سنة في الكتاب والحديث صيانة للعلم لفقد العصمة من النسيان. Alama Bazdawi rahimahullah, he mentions this here in his usul. Eventually there was total consensus about the permissibility of writing a hadith. Ibn al-Mulaqqin rahimahullah, he said ثم إنه زال ذلك الخلاف وأجمعوا على الجواز ولولا تدوينه لدرس في العصر الأخيرة. This here is in al-Muqni' في علوم الحديث on page 342. Rahmallah is saying وقيد بالتام إشارة إلى الرتبة العليا في ذلك. Qasim rahmallah, he raised this objection and he said إن كان هذا هو التام فلا تتحقق المراتب. If you're saying that a person's method of preserving ضبط التام, because remember for Alama Qasim, he objected on adding this word tam, just saying that how can you have Ḍabṭ, which is tam. So he's saying, if this is what you're meaning by tam, then how can one person's book preserve it more than another person's book? Whether you write with untidy handwriting, as long as it's legible, or whether you write extremely neat, at the end it's still that you are preserving the narration. So he said, إن كان هذا هو التام فلا تتحقق المراتب فإن لم تكن له هذه الحيثية فهو سيء الحفظ أو ضعيفة وليس حديثه بالصحيح. And then he says ثم الضبط بالكتاب لا يتصور فيه تمام وقصور. So he says وبالجملة ففي التعريف he's saying that this this definition of Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is not very accurate. Alama Raqqani rahimahullah, he explains والمراد بالتجهيل, that he said ففي التعريف تجهيل, so he said والمراد بالتجهيل الجهادة لعدم إفادته ما تتميز به المراتب, that when a person is writing down the narration, then you cannot create different levels and say that this person is making better ضبط and that person is complete ضبط, etc. However, Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he explains that if a person fulfills all of these conditions and he narrates from a book, then in all circumstances we can simply say that it's regarded as tam. So he says وأما ضبط الكتاب فالظاهر أن كله تام لا يتصور فيه النقصان. So that you can put this condition of tam ضبط in the definition. Why? Because ضبط الكتاب, the entire ضبط الكتاب is considered as tam. Now, for a narration of the one who is quoting from a script to be accepted, there are a few conditions, and it's important that I mention this, although time is up. The first is that the narrator must ensure that what he wrote that correctly. You can see Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned وَصَحَّهُ, that he corrected it. So he does this here, it's called muqabala. He cross-checks, he checks it against the script of the teacher or of the reliable students. The second is that the narrator must protect the script in such a way that no one can add or delete or change or distort this text by getting possession of it. علم القاني رحمه الله says ومعنى التام في ضبط الكتاب ألا يتساهل في الاهتمام عليه ولا في صونه كما هو بين, that a person is not very lenient in the way he is protecting it and in the way he is preserving his book, that anyone can get hold of it and add to what he wrote, etc., edit whatever is written there. This here is the meaning of tam. And that is why Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah said that the person should not even lend his books. حيث لا أمن من تغيير المستعير, that the person who is borrowing the book, he can then edit it. So therefore he should not lend the book to anyone. And then another condition is that when narrating, the narrator must confine himself exactly to what he is written in the book. It shouldn't be that he wrote something and now he's quoting more than that. A question here also arises is that will it be permissible for a narrator to narrate from the book if he misplaced the book and then he found the book after some time? So in response to this here, according to the majority of scholars, it will be permissible. So you have scholars like Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan and Fazl ibn Maysara, Allama Khatib Baghdadi rahimahullah himself also, they did not mind that the book left a narrator's possession, he lost it for a short period of time. In Al-Kifaya, Allama Khatib rahimahullah, he quotes with his sanad to Amr ibn Ali, that qala Amr ibn Ali, قلت ليحيى بن سعيد, I asked Yahya ibn Sa'id, قال لي سالم بن نوح ضاع مني كتاب يونس والجريري فوجدتهما بعد 40 سنة أحدث بهما. So you can imagine that the person found it after 40 years. He's asking that can I narrate from it, and they permitted him. However, other scholars, they felt that because a person lost a book, it will not be now permissible for him to narrate from that book. And amongst other scholars, those who held this view is like you have Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Ansari and Ismail ibn Abbas, Ibn al-Mahdi, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, rahmallah, etc. Why? Because they felt that you lost the book, there's such a great chance that someone else could have got hold of that book and they could have discussed, they could have distorted some of what is written. And this here also depends, those who permitted, they said it mustn't be evident that there is distortion. So قال الخطيب والذي عندي في هذا أنه متى غاب كتابه عنه ثم عاد إليه ولم ير فيه أثر تغيير حادث من زيادة أو نقصان أو تبديل وسكنت نفسه إلى سلامة إجازة. Yes, that we saying it's permissible, but it must be that there is no apparent signs of distortion. And here also you should note that scholars, they would really look after their notes so that no one can edit or change anything. But they could only do this while they were alive, isn't it? So a narrator, he can take all the caution that he wants whilst he is alive. But after he passes away, then anyone can get possession of his notes. So that leads to a question. Then if you are saying it's permissible to make your own notes, if someone else finds that notes after a person passes away, how would we know that that person did not add anything? So for this, scholars would actually make wasiyah that the notes must be destroyed. So while they were alive, they transmitted it, and now these narrations have been will be passed on to future generations. But their specific notes that must be destroyed. And there are many examples of this here. For example, the son of Shu'bah, so Sa'ad ibn Shu'bah, he said, "Awsa abi idha mata an aghsila kutubahu faghasaltuha." And after quoting this very same narration, Imam Dhahabi rahimahullah, he mentioned in Siyar A'lam an-Nubala, volume 7, page 213, وَهَذَا قَدْ فَعَلَهُ غَيْرُ وَاحِدْ بِالْغَسْلِ وَبِالْحَرْقِ وبالدفن خوفا من أن تقع في يد إنسان واهن يزيد فيها أو يغيرها. That many scholars, they gave the same wasiyah, that you should wash it, or you should burn it, or you should just bury it. Why? Because they had this fear that a person should not get, a person who is weak should not get hold of it. Then a question arises, what's better between Ḍabṭ al-Sadr and Ḍabṭ al-Kitab? So many scholars, they gave preference to written narrations. And other scholars, they would combine both. They say that memory and retention. So Ulama ibn Abi Hatim rahimahullah, he brought the chapter Bab Zikra Hifdh Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. And thereafter he quotes حدثنا عبد الرحمن قال حدثنا الحسين بن الحسين الرازي قال سمعت علي بن المديني يقول ليس في أصحابنا أحفظ من أبي عبد الله أحمد ibn Hanbal. That no one has a better memory than Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. In spite of that, وبلغني أنه لا يحدث إلا من كتاب. Then it has reached me that he does not transmit except if he has it written down and he's looking in his book. وَلَنَا فِيهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. And then Ali ibn al-Madini, such a great scholar, you know, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah really held him in high esteem. He really felt that he could not match him. He said that وَلَنَا فِيهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. And regarding our times, Abdul Aziz ibn al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he said فَأَمَّا فِي زَمَانِنَا فَالْقِسْمُ الثَّانِي الَّذِي انْقَلَمَ عَزِيمَةً أَقْوَى مِنَ الْقِسْمِ الْأَوَّلِ. Very quickly to go through this last line here, وَقُيِّدَ بِالتَّامِ إِشَارَةً إِلَى الرُّتْبَةِ الْعُلْيَا فِي ذَلِكَ. That is conditioned with the word completely in the definition. Hafiz ibn Hajar mentioned completely, so he spoke about it under Ḍabṭ al-Kitab. But when explaining this condition, Alama Qasim rahimahullah, he objected and he said, Allahu a'lamu bima'na tamam al-Ḍabṭ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone knows what's the meaning of tamam al-Ḍabṭ. That even if you have to look at it for Ḍabṭ al-Sadr, there are billions of people in this world. So how would you know whose memory reached that stage of perfection? What's that higher stage of memory? That whose memory is going to be considered as complete? That is it essential that a person really has to memorize everything? That and then how much is everything? That if a person is narrating and another person is also narrating consecutively, then must he memorize from both of them? So Alama al-Qani rahimahullah, he also deemed this here to be a valid objection. Generally he responds to Alama Qasim ibn Qutlubgh's objections, but here he said ولا شك في صحة توقفه في ذلك فجعل محترزه كثير الخطأ وفلا شك في اختلاف مراتب الكثرة. And Alama al-Qani rahimahullah, he then quotes from Alama Baqa'i rahimahullah. And you know, this is one of the reasons why Qada'ul Watar is so valuable, because it quotes from Alama Baqa'i. Otherwise, all of this from Alama Baqa'i would have probably been lost. So he says that this here is relative, that this condition of time is relative. ويكون المراد بالكثرة أمرا نسبيا. فمن حفظ 3000 حديث. So say for example, a person, he memorized 3000 ahadith. So now 3,000 فأخطأ في 50 منها. But he only made a mistake in this. Now one person might look at it that he made a mistake in 50 ahadith. This is a lot. فقد أخطأ في كثير. But another person might think that no, look, it's 3,000 narrations. So therefore, although it's 50 sounds like a big number, but it's actually just a very small amount and he has a very good memory. So although the word tam is used, if a person's memory is slightly deficient, then it will not affect his narration and we will still grade that narration is صحيح. علماء عراقي رحمه الله mentions وكذلك الضبط والإلقان درجاته متفاوتة فلا يشترط علاه وجود